Welcome to Plants in Paradise, a weekly show sponsored by the City of Key West to help you keep your plants and garden growing. Now, here's your host, Landscape Coordinator for the City of Key West, Kath.
Welcome to Plants in Paradise, a program that will explore some of the different perspectives of our tropical plant world. Some of the topics that we'll look at are landscaping, horticulture, and the unique native flora of the Florida Keys. Today my guest is Lois Kitching, and I welcome you. I appreciate you spending the time to
Pleasure.
come in today. Lois is an officer with the Key West Garden Club, and I have to say one of the recognized experts of both native and exotic plants in the Florida Keys. And Lois, I'm curious, has plants and landscaping and the whole idea been an interest of yours throughout your life, or?
Yes, I used to ask my dad, could I cut the grass? So I had to like it. I have always been interested in plants.
How long have you lived in the Florida Keys then?
Since 1950.
And you've been working with plants through that time, or?
Oh, more so in the last 20 years than before that. I was still raising young'uns when we first came down here. But, I've always liked them. I mean, I've always had plants around. Wherever we went, we always fixed a yard or something like that.
And carried around your potted little friends with you along the way. Well, you have spent many years and a great deal of time learning about the plants of the Keys and household plants. Can you give us some tips for beginners or people who are interested to help them learn as well?
Well, I started out more or less trial and error. To begin with, you have to like plants. If you don't like them, don't push yourself into doing it. It just doesn't work. Then it is work and not a pleasure. And start basically with something that you like, and
add to that knowledge.
Just add to it, right?
Yeah, I found in my experience that if you start with too much, your mind just overloads.
Right.
So it's better to pick out maybe 2, 3 things, work with those, and
get acquainted with the first thing you start with, and then that will lead you into other things that might be relative. Sometimes people like to stay with one type of thing. But not like people, you like to meet new ones every once in a while too. And first thing you know, you're knowing too many people at the same time, and it keeps you busy.
So you find that the secret to having a green thumb then is starting small and becoming familiar and then growing slowly and expanding on that. Lois has brought a part of her really expansive personal collection of plants today. I think we'll take a short break, and we'll be back with Plants of Paradise in a short while and take a look at some of the different plants that Lois can tell us about. Welcome again to Plants in Paradise. Our guest this evening is Mrs. Lois Kitching, and Lois has brought in quite an array of plants, a sampling really of her extensive plant collection. I think at this time we'll take a look at some of the individual plants and discuss propagation, general care, and also places that you might be able to find these plants, where you might be able to buy them in the community. Lois, where do we start?
Well, you want to start at this end, Kathy?
Okay, sure. What have we got here?
That's an alocasia. It's in the
Let me bring that out in the open a little bit.
Araceae family. It likes lots of moisture. It's relative to elephant ears. They usually like lots of water. Filtered shade, filtered light, and fertilizer.
Fertilizer. It needs plenty of food then. Would you use this as a, say, a potted plant on a patio, or does it do well if put into the soil?
if your soil is right,
Mm-hmm.
it'll do well in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's in planters or individual pots, and they do multiply by young plants coming up from underground. That's one of 4 that I got off the plant that I had purchased.
Oh, so
And
these
it's
are
already putting up little ones starting here.
okay. So these are pups then that can be
Right.
removed and
Right.
and potted up, and they will grow on their own. Very good.
I think I bought 3 plants, and right now I've got about 25 of various sizes.
And how long a period of time has it been that you've been collecting little ones off of that?
Oh, about a month or so.
Mm-hmm.
There were some when I bought the plants, and I never look for a single plant. I always look for some that have more than one in it, and then go from there.
Yeah. How about this one? Looks like the croton.
That is a croton. That was, I would say, a natural hybrid. It was a seedling that came up in the yard, and I haven't any crotons that look like that in the yard, so it had to be hybridized on its own.
Mm-hmm. Well, how would you recommend to people, other than collecting seedlings, that they propagate their own crotons?
You can either take cuttings, or if you want a large one, the best way is to air layer it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a future program you're going into more specifics
I
on
will.
those
I'll
things.
explain how to do that and how to.
There's one thing I would like to caution people about when they're working with crotons is to be sure they have old clothes on. Because the sap from the croton, it will not show when it gets on your clothes. As soon as you put them in the washing machine, you get
The stains
you get the
come
dark
out.
brown spots. Also, if your skin is sensitive or you want to be have your hands looking nice,
Mhm.
wear rubber gloves or plastic gloves because the stain will get into your hands.
Mm. It's good to remember.
It comes out, but well, if you were going to a dinner party that night, you wouldn't want to go looking with hands,
with brown hands.
brown hands.
Yeah. That brings up something that I find is very helpful in growing plants and in taking care of them, is that you have a place, a standard place around the home that you use time after time. You have your supplies there to work with plants, and also a set of clothing, like the case you mentioned with the crotons staining your clothes or your skin. And you can avoid some problems and a lot of frustration if you have a set area and wardrobe to use while you're playing with the plants. What are these down on the other end of the table? That colorful one there.
This red one out in front is impatiens. It's a succulent, likes lots and lots of water. They grow very fast. Cold air will nip them. This yellow leaf here, there's several of them on here, is a result of the cold weather we had. And but they will lose those leaves and just keep getting. I've already gotten about 30 cuttings off of that particular plant, and they're about so high. Some of them are about so high now that they're doing very well in this warmer weather. They like it a lot.
You take the cuttings then and put them in perlite, or do you have any?
I use perlite, just perlite in a old pot or container that has good drainage in it. Just stick them in, and within minimum of 2 weeks, usually 3 to 4 weeks, you've got a good root system on them. You just take them out and plant them. I use a mix that's peat, perlite, and a little vermiculite. I mean, you can get it commercially in small amounts, or I usually buy a bale at a time.
Is this the potting soil that you use?
That's what I use primarily for most of my potting.
Okay, and what was that mix again?
It's a mixture of peat, perlite, vermiculite, and it's supposed to have some trace elements of fertilizer in it, which gives them a little boost.
A little head start.
Right.
Great.
You don't have to fertilize immediately. You can wait a month or so and then start your fertilizer program.
Okay. I've seen these in other colors. Do you...
There's many colors. There's also a variety that's called New Guinea impatiens. It has variegated leaves. The flowers are much larger, and they like full sun in order to bloom profusely. These like shouldered light. They will take some late afternoon sun or early morning sun, but
But they won't
heat of the
take
day, they don't
intense.
like it too well.
All right.
Not full sun.
Okay. And behind that looks like a crown of thorns.
That's one of the many crown of thorns, or euphorbia.
Now that's a large family. Includes what? The poinsettia,
crotons,
crotons,
poinsettias.
the let's see what else. There's many. Pencil tree or
right.
Mm-hmm.
Many varied things. In fact, you could do a complete program for several programs just on euphorbias alone. This has been interesting to me this year. I've always found seedlings coming up a few at a time. And this year is the first time I took the time to see the seeds forming on the plant.
Flowers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Now these red pieces or flower parts that are also growing around the seeds, those are not actually petals, are they?
They're bracts.
Bracts. Which is
same as, more or less the same as your poinsettia. The red part of the poinsettia, most people think is the bloom. It's not. The flowers and the bloom are the little tiny things in the center.
those little yellow
Mm-hmm.
things in the center. So these are more like a leaf, a
Right.
modified leaf, and the flower then
Right.
comes out of
Little
the center.
little tiny things. Here's a few of the sepals showing up there. The flower itself is inside.
Mm-hmm.
There's another euphorbia in front of the haworthia there.
Let's see, which one?
That one.
Here we are. Okay, let me bring that over with the crown of thorns.
The blooms on this are completely different. I don't know whether you can see them there or not. The little tiny white things
Mm-hmm.
down in there. And this also seeds, but I haven't caught any of the seeds on this. I pick up the plants they come up in the grass.
Mm-hmm.
Leaf mulch and so on and so on. In fact, this pot here, I didn't count them, but there's more than a half a dozen seedlings
in there.
that have
Started on their own.
started just on their own. I don't know whether you can catch that on the...
Here in front, there's
Right.
several small plants.
And there's about 3 or 4 more in the back here.
Mm-hmm.
And they're quite fast as far as growing. Seedling will get that so high in about a month and a half.
What about light and water requirements?
With good drainage, Crown of Thorns likes more water than most people want to give it.
Mm.
In other words, as long as your drainage is good, they'll take rain, water. This last rainy spell that we had, I kept going around emptying hanging basket saucers all day long. It seemed like
Trying to
it.
keep these dry.
But I haven't had any problems with them so far, so they will take a good bit amount of moisture. And this is not full sun, but very bright light. And they like it. Some of them have a tendency to burn a little if they're in full sun in the middle of the day.
And what are the symptoms of the burning?
Yellowish leaves, or they'll, if it burns too badly, you can always end up with a black spots or something like that on it.
Okay. Well, let's see. Let's move on to your ferns. I think we have 3 here.
We have 3. 2 are in the same family, but you wouldn't think they were. This is
Got that there.
an Asplenium viviparum, and I'm not trying to be smart. It's the only name I know for it. There's no common name. But it is one of the mother ferns. And these are the little tiny plantlets that form on the leaves. In fact, some of them are bigger than others. I have quite a few of them now that I took off. They pull right off.
Many on that plant.
And I don't know
If we can get those on the camera.
whether that will show up or not. Even
Sure.
a single leaf, they have a little knob on the base or bud. And I put them in a terrarium with sphagnum moss and cover it, leaving just a little bit of space for oxygen and such. And hopefully in about a year or so, I'll have some
You'll have
made about
more
that.
ferns.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Very moist conditions then
Moist,
are
yes.
the best.
Not sopping wet, but they
Need that
they
high
just- they
humidity.
like high humidity and moisture.
All right.
This one is in the same family. They all start out in the middle. This one will have the same effect.
So the stem is one central
Right.
clump or cluster.
All your new growth keeps coming up out of the middle of them. This hasn't spored yet, but this is from spores in the yard that the wind has blown around
Carried
and
around.
started in some of my hanging baskets.
For those not familiar with ferns and how they propagate, where would you find the spores on a plant like this?
On this, they'll come up in lines, brown, very close together. And when they're mature, the wind just takes them and blows them.
They're not a true seed, but...
No, ferns do not seed, nor do they bloom. They have no flower.
So if someone would see a rusty coating on the underside of a fern leaf, it would probably be the spores then?
Right. There are some ferns that are called warty ferns. They have little round brown spots on the backs of the leaves. And the first time that ever appears, most people think it's scale on the back of their ferns and that they're full of bugs. Pick them up and throw them away. That's only their means of
Wait a little while.
prolonging the species. This is also a fern.
Let me give that a bit more room.
It's one of the tecterias, and this one, the only way you can really keep it thriving is to have a big saucer of water underneath it and keep it full of water at all times.
It sounds then that most of the ferns need very humid conditions.
Most
Not
of the
all
time,
of them.
this will grow as an epiphyte also,
Oh, meaning
meaning it can be growing on a tree in a
with,
little bit
with
of
no soil, but
no
just
soil,
some
maybe
sort of support for its
broken
roots.
down leaf mulch and such as that. Ferns adapt fairly well to a lot of conditions, but in order to keep them moist, it's a little difficult to keep the tree moist sometimes with our winds blowing and all.
Right. What about light conditions? What generally for ferns?
Generally, they like filtered light. I have a couple ferns at home that were too big to bring that get a good bit of full sun and early afternoon, and they're just as green as the others. So.
All right, in front of the ferns, I think we have a couple of peperomias. Tell us a little bit about these.
Peperomias do not like to be too wet too long. They'll rot. In fact, the common ones you see huge hanging baskets of, they like to stay on the dry side. A good drenching, but then let them dry out.
So needed soil that drains well.
Well-drained soil. There's very few things that don't want well-drained soil, and they'd be more or less swamp plants rather than...
And that goes back to the soil mix that you use with the perlite, vermiculite, and peat. And which peperomia is this one?
Well, when I bought it, they called it Cyclops. And right now, off the top of my head, I can't remember the botanical name.
Oh, beautiful one. Large, attractive leaves.
It's different. I didn't really think it was a peperomia, but when they bloom, that's always the bloom is inconspicuous, but it is a positive identification as far as peperomia.
For the group, the peperomias. All right. We have a few more of Lois's plants, but at this time I think we'll take a short break. Lois Kitching has come to Plants in Paradise to help out with some hints on general household plant care. We'll be back in a short while. Back again with Mrs. Lois Kitching, and we're learning a bit about the care and upkeep of some of the household plants that are available in the Florida Keys. Now, why don't we take a look at the one on the far left, Hoya, and it looks like.
This is one of the easy ones to grow. In fact, this one was resurrected. It had suffered from root rot, and the woman was going to throw it out because she thought it was dying. The leaves were shriveled and this and that. So I just put a new cut on it, put it in perlite, and rooted it, And
look at it.
it's doing beautifully now.
Sure, sure. What would have caused the root rot in the first place?
Too wet,
Too much moisture.
too much moisture.
Does that
or
come
poor
back?
poor drainage.
We go back again to a
And,
proper soil mix for your
And she had
plant.
had it in a very heavy, mucky, muddy soil. And
Need
well,
something
it
to
just-
break it up a bit.
right.
Loosen it up.
But it's doing beautifully now. I expect it to bloom before long. Root knot and root rot are the biggest problems with Hoyas.
Okay. What do we have here?
That is the, tell me.
Traveler's tree.
Traveler's tree. Erroneously called traveler's palm. It is not in the palm family, it's in the banana family.
Mm-hmm. So propagation is similar? Can you take suckers off of it?
I have never taken the suckers or pups, whatever you wish to call them, off of one. This is from seed.
Mm-hmm.
And the seeds are embedded in the blooms, or bloom pods that are left over. They're very colorful, and they sprout very fast, and they grow fast. This is, probably a little over a year old.
Oh,
And they do, like bananas, they like lots of water, and they like lots of fertilizer.
okay. And we have a bromeliad here. Let me move this out of the way.
Okay.
In bloom.
This is a Vresia. It's a hybrid. It's called Junior. Those that are interested, it's a cross between Vresia maryi and Vresia heterostechis. And it was developed by Worthman. I got this one at a bromeliad show about 4 years ago.
I think I should mention the bromeliads are all in the pineapple family, correct?
Pineapple and also Spanish moss.
Spanish
moss is
in
a
the same
bromeliad.
family.
Actually, Kathy, I think if you can work it out, you should have a program just on bromeliads,
Bromeliads.
because it could go on for hours, believe me.
I think another group that could be treated likewise are the begonias. We have a few in the front. And
We have 3 different kinds here. And these are all cuttings off of, or started from a leaf.
Mhm.
And that is another thing that you could take up a full program.
Is
if
propagation of the
propagation
different
and
types.
such.
This is another plant that requires good drainage, is that?
Very good drainage. They do better on the and they do not want to be over-potted.
Okay.
They'd rather be crowded, and it seems like you get better growth on top than you do on the bottom.
Okay. What is this little baby? Looks like it has flowers.
That's a Haworthia.
Haworthia. And what general group?
Succulents,
Succulents?
cacti succulent type, yes.
Related to the aloe?
Yes,
that
lily
group?
family.
Okay. There again, I think good drainage is important.
Very
Not
good.
Too much water.
In fact, usually to get good drainage, you can always add about half again as much perlite
Mm-hmm.
as peating,
As peat.
peat says.
Okay. Well, we've looked at a variety of different plants, and I'd like to ask Lois about some general care that these plants require. Once you have them propagated, once they are growing, how about fertilizer?
Well,
What-
usually for the potted plants, unless they're huge ones, the great big ones, I usually use Osmocote, which is a time release.
I have a little bit of that
Yeah.
here. It's a pellet form fertilizer. Let's see if we can try to... All right, there we have it. And these pellets, in the proper conditions, temperature, moisture, release the fertilizer over a long period of time. And how long do these usually last? What, 3 or 4 months, would you say?
3 to 4. They say 6 to 8, but with our warmer climate down here, fertilizers dissipate much faster.
Okay.
Generally, a good rule of thumb for most house plants or container-grown plants is with Peters, which is a water-soluble.
I've got a bit of that here, too.
It could be any other water-soluble. To use it at about half or quarter strength. Quarter
Dilute
strength.
solution, then.
And every time you water your plants,
Add a little bit of the water
the
base.
fertilizer, right?
All right.
They're just like people. They don't want one meal a month and then starve in between.
In
times.
between.
I mean,
So constant food supply is good.
Right.
All right.
And when we get our torrential rains, fertilizer is gone real fast, right on through.
Okay, we've looked at a number of different types of plants, and what would you suggest for information sources so that people can learn more about the plants or to help them identify things that they pick up along the way?
Well, if you want to dig with the books,
All right?
there's quite a few places. I think you know some of them. You have some.
Okay.
I would say if you're interested in getting books, check the book out before you go purchase it. Because
Definitely.
it may not cover what
Right.
you're
Borrow it from a friend.
Right.
Check it out at the library. One book that I have found quite useful is Florida Landscape Plants by Watkins and Sheehan. It is available at the Monroe County Library to peruse, and I think most of the bookstores in town have them.
Incidentally, the Key West Garden Club has a pretty good library, and people are welcome to use the books on the premises.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot check them out,
But they can
but
look,
they can
their
come in
heart's
and
content,
right.
look at all they want. All right, some other books that I have found helpful are freebies from the state government. One is Native Trees and Landscaping, Native Trees and Plants for Florida Landscaping. Another is Flowers, Shrubs, and Trees, again, put out by the state. And the third is Urban Trees for Florida, another state publication. Now, all of these are available if you write to certain agencies within the state. To get information on how to find them, you would want to contact the Monroe County Extension Office, and they are located on Stock Island. Very, very helpful in all aspects of horticulture, landscaping, any plant care. The Monroe County Extension Service can be a big help. Well, Lois, I thank you very, very much.
It's been a pleasure, Kathy.
I
Just like
learned a
sitting
lot.
and talking like always.
Yeah.
Right, right.
But you've been a big help with your collection here, and I hope the viewers at home have been able to identify maybe a mystery plant that they have in their own garden. Thank you for tuning in, and it's Plants in Paradise with Kathy Wolf.
Plants in Paradise is sponsored by the City of Key West. Gardening product brand names are used for informational purposes only. Such mention does not constitute an endorsement of a product over others that may do the same job while used in a similar manner. Questions or comments on today's show can be sent to this station, Telecommunications Incorporated, 1700 North Roosevelt Boulevard, Key West, Florida, 33040.